The Croth starship broke through the cloud cover, descending toward Earth's frozen northern wastelands. The alien vessel, a sleek predator forged from dark alloys and sharp edges, hovered silently over the Arctic tundra, its shadow casting a long, unnatural shape across the snow-covered expanse. On board, General Viezor, commander of the Croth invasion force, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, gazing down at what he perceived as a desolate wasteland, an empty stretch of ice, wind, and cold. He allowed himself a rare smile. Pathetic, Viezor muttered to himself. This world boasts such formidable defenses, yet here, in this frozen land, there is nothing. No resistance. No life. The Croth had conquered countless worlds, and Earth was merely another target in their expansion. Viezor had expected more from this planet. Reports of human resilience were well known across the galaxy, but as he looked out over the frozen tundra, he saw nothing but barren snowfields. The cold meant nothing to the Croth, their technology shielded them from the elements. He doubted any human could survive here. Below the ship, massive drills descended from the alien craft, burrowing into the ice with surgical precision. The Croth had detected valuable resources deep beneath the surface, and Viezor's mission was simple: extract those resources and establish a forward operating base in the Arctic. From here, the Croth could expand their control over Earth's northern hemisphere. Viezor was confident it would be a swift victory. The first platoon of Croth soldiers deployed from the ship, their sleek, black exocets cutting through the icy winds. They moved with mechanical precision, setting up portable shield generators and defensive turrets around the drill site. Their armor shimmered faintly, absorbing the radiant energy from their suits, keeping the soldiers warm despite the sub-zero temperatures. Deploy the excavation teams. Begin the extraction, Viezor commanded. His voice was calm, authoritative. He had led many invasions and knew this would be no different. Far beneath the surface, hidden in the endless white, another set of eyes watched the alien landing with cold, unblinking focus. Captain Logan Holt, leader of the Arctic Rangers, lay motionless under a thick layer of snow, his breath slow and controlled. His face was barely visible beneath his snow camo, and his rifle was covered in frost, blending perfectly into the icy terrain. Around him, his team of elite soldiers waited in silence, concealed just as effectively by the tundra. Holt's eyes tracked every movement of the alien soldiers. His heart beat steadily, his training allowing him to remain completely still, even as the Croth continued their deployment. These were no ordinary invaders. They were organized, technologically advanced, and well-armed. But they were arrogant. They believed the cold would keep them safe from human interference. Holt knew otherwise. He tapped his earpiece, transmitting a signal to his second-in-command, Sergeant Marcus Kane, positioned a few hundred meters away in another snowblind. "Kane, you seeing this?" Holt whispered, his voice barely audible. "Affirmative, Cap," came the low reply. "Looks like they've got some fancy toys. This isn't gonna be easy." Holt's eyes narrowed as he observed the alien equipment. The drills were massive, clearly designed to pierce deep into the ice. Whatever the Croth were after, it was buried far below. But it wasn't the technology that concerned Holt, it was the soldiers. The Croth moved with an unsettling precision, as though every step had been calculated in advance. Their black exocets seemed to pulse with energy, the faint hum of their shields barely audible over the Arctic wind. "They don't know we're here," Holt murmured. "And we need to keep it that way, for now." He had no illusions about the battle to come. The Rangers were few in number, but they had something the Croth couldn't match: intimate knowledge of the terrain. Holt and his men had spent years training in the Arctic. They knew how to move in the snow, how to blend into the ice, and most importantly, how to use the brutal cold to their advantage. The Croth thought the tundra was empty, devoid of life. They had no idea the Rangers were out there, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Let them get comfortable," Holt whispered into his mic. "We'll hit them when they least expect it." As the hours passed, the Croth continued to fortify their position. Generators hummed to life, creating a protective dome of energy around the drill site, shielding the aliens from the howling winds and freezing temperatures. Viazor, overseeing the operation from his command post, was satisfied. The Croth soldiers worked efficiently, oblivious to the invisible threat lurking just beyond their sensor range. What the Croth failed to understand, however, was that their advanced technology, while impressive, wasn't infallible. The Arctic was Holt's territory, and he knew how to exploit its dangers. The temperature was steadily dropping, and the wind was picking up, conditions that would work in favor of the Rangers. "Storm's coming in." Kane's voice crackled over the calm. "We might want to use that to our advantage." "Already ahead of you," Holt replied, his mind racing. The storm would reduce visibility to almost zero, making it nearly impossible for the Croth to detect the Rangers' movements. It was exactly the kind of cover they needed to launch their first attack. As the wind began to howl and snow started to swirl around them, Holt gave the signal. The Rangers, hidden in the snowbanks and ice drifts, readied their weapons. The time for observation was over. Now, it was time to strike. "They think the cold is their ally," Holt muttered under his breath. "But they haven't met us yet." With a final glance at the advancing storm, Holt prepared his team for the coming battle. The aliens had made their first mistake, entering the Arctic without realizing the true threat it held. Now, they would pay for their arrogance. The storm hit with an unforgiving ferocity. Snow swept across the tundra in thick, blinding sheets, driven by howling winds that bit through even the thickest layers of clothing. For most, the Arctic storm would be a death sentence. For the Arctic Rangers, it was the perfect cover. Captain Logan Holt lay flat in the snow, his eyes narrowed against the storm's onslaught. Through his scope, he could barely make out the shimmering outline of the Croth energy dome in the distance, a faint glow against the storm's chaos. Inside, the alien soldiers moved like clockwork, their movements rehearsed, mechanical. But the storm had disoriented them. The Croth, accustomed to relying on their advanced technology, now found their sensors struggling to compensate for the blizzard's interference. "On my mark," Holt whispered into his earpiece, his breath visible in the frigid air. Sergeant Marcus Kane, positioned in another snowblind a few hundred meters away, was already lined up, his rifle aimed at the weak point in the Croth defense. The portable shield generators surrounding the alien drill site created a formidable barrier, but Holt and Kane had been studying them for hours, looking for any vulnerability. "We've got a 10-second window before their next sensor sweep." Kane's voice crackled softly in Holt's ear. "You sure about this, Cap?" Holt didn't hesitate. "Do it." Kane squeezed the trigger. His rifle's suppressed shot was swallowed by the wind, but the impact was immediate. The bullet struck the shield generator at its base, shattering the delicate power coupling with pinpoint precision. The energy barrier flickered, then collapsed entirely, leaving the Croth soldiers exposed to the elements, and to the Rangers. "Move!" Holt barked, and in an instant, his team sprang into action. The Arctic Rangers emerged from their icy concealment like ghosts, moving silently and swiftly through the snowstorm. Their white camouflage made them nearly invisible against the swirling snow, while the storm masked the sound of their approach. They had trained for years in these conditions, honing their ability to navigate the frozen wastelands undetected. Now, that training was paying off. The Croth, momentarily disoriented by the sudden loss of their shield, scrambled to react. Alien commands echoed through the storm as the invaders rushed to set up defensive positions, but they were too slow. The first wave of Rangers hit them like a hammer. Holt led the charge, his rifle spitting fire as he moved with deadly precision. He dropped one Croth soldier with a clean headshot, then another with a burst to the chest. Around him, his men moved with the same lethal efficiency, their silenced weapons cutting down the alien invaders before they could even return fire. The Croth, so confident in their technological superiority, had underestimated the Rangers' ability to adapt and strike with precision in the harshest conditions. Sergeant Kane, positioned on a rise overlooking the battlefield, provided overwatch, picking off Croth soldiers as they tried to regroup. His shots were methodical, each one finding its mark. Kane was the best marksman in the unit, and in these conditions, his skill was invaluable. "Keep the pressure on," Holt ordered through the comms. Don't give them a chance to breathe. The Rangers pushed forward, using the terrain to their advantage. Snowbanks, ice drifts, and the howling wind provided natural cover, allowing them to reposition before the Kroth could get a fix on their location. The aliens, though formidable in their own right, were struggling. Their exosuits were designed for combat in a variety of environments, but the Arctic cold was sapping their energy reserves faster than expected. Their advanced optics and targeting systems were useless in the blizzard, leaving them reliant on visual confirmation, something the Rangers denied them at every turn. The battle unfolded like a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Kroth attempted to regroup, forming a defensive perimeter around the drill site, but the Rangers were relentless. They struck from unexpected angles, using the storm to mask their movements. One moment, a Kroth soldier would be manning a turret, the next, he'd be lying in the snow, felled by a silent shot. Holt's heart raced as he darted from one position to the next, his instincts honed by years of combat in these unforgiving conditions. He fired short, controlled bursts, always aiming to neutralize the Kroth quickly and efficiently. The storm was both an ally and an enemy. It concealed their movements, but it also reduced visibility to mere meters. Every step had to be calculated, every movement purposeful. Cap, they're trying to fall back. Kane's voice crackled over the comm. Looks like they're regrouping near the drill. Holt gritted his teeth. The drill was the key to the Kroth's mission here. Whatever they were after, it was buried deep beneath the ice, and if the aliens completed their excavation, it could spell disaster for the Rangers. They needed to shut it down. Focus fire on the drill, Holt ordered. We take that out, and they lose their reason for being here. The Rangers shifted their focus, laying down suppressive fire on the Kroth soldiers guarding the drill. Explosions ripped through the snow as grenades found their targets, sending alien machinery and personnel flying in all directions. Holt advanced with his squad, his eyes locked on the massive drill as it continued its slow, methodical descent into the ice. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the Kroth command post, followed by a low, thrumming hum. Holt's stomach dropped as he realized what was happening. They're activating the failsafe, Kane shouted. They're gonna blow the drill rather than let us take it. Fall back, Holt barked. Now! The Rangers retreated as a deafening explosion shook the ground beneath them. The drill site erupted in a plume of fire and ice, sending shockwaves across the tundra. Holt hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. For a moment, everything was white, snow, smoke, and fire mixed into a blinding, chaotic swirl. When the dust settled, the drill was gone, reduced to a smoldering crater. The Kroth, or what remained of them, had fallen back to their ship, regrouping for another assault. Holt rose to his feet, his body aching from the blast. He surveyed the battlefield. They had won this round, but the Kroth were still out there, and they wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. They're not done yet, Holt muttered under his breath. Neither are we. The storm had worsened. What was once a steady barrage of wind and snow had transformed into a maelstrom of icy fury. The Kroth had regrouped, their ships now hovering just above the frozen wasteland, casting eerie shadows over the battlefield. They weren't going to retreat this time. Captain Logan Holt could feel it in his bones. The aliens were preparing for a final assault. Holt crouched behind a jagged ice formation, his breath coming out in shallow, controlled bursts. The Arctic wind howled around him, but his mind was as clear as the ice underfoot. Beside him, his second-in-command, Sergeant Marcus Kane, was busy reloading his rifle, his movements precise despite the cold. How's the arm holding up? Holt asked, glancing at Kane's shoulder, where a piece of shrapnel had ripped through his jacket during the last engagement. Kane grunted. Feels like it's on fire, but I'll manage. What's the plan, Cap? Holt scanned the horizon. The Kroth were preparing to descend, their alien figures outlined by the glow of their ship's engines. They were setting up heavy artillery now, massive plasma cannons designed to cut through ice and flesh alike. There was no longer any question, this was it. The final stand. We draw them in, Holt said, his voice steady. We've got the terrain advantage. They're blind in this storm, just like before. But we know these grounds, they don't. We keep moving, hit them hard, and force them into the open. Once they overextend, we finish it. Kane nodded, wincing slightly as he slung his rifle over his shoulder. Sounds like a death trap for them. Holt's lips twitched into a brief smile. Exactly. The Rangers were scattered across the tundra, hidden beneath layers of snow and ice, waiting for Holt's signal. He briefed them on the strategy: lure the Croth into a choke point between two massive glaciers where the storm hit hardest. It was the only place where they could limit the aliens' mobility, forcing them to fight on the Rangers' terms. Everyone in position? Holt asked into his earpiece. Ready, came the response from Corporal Dwayne Briggs, the demolition expert, stationed near the entrance of the glacier pass. Locked and loaded, added Private Nathaniel Jones, one of the younger Rangers, whose eyes had always been sharpest in the blinding snow. Holt felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but the Rangers had never fought with numbers. They fought with strategy, and they fought with heart. That would have to be enough. Here they come, Kane said, his eyes narrowing as the Croth advanced, their sleek black armor barely visible in the swirling snow. The alien soldiers moved with a mechanical precision, their plasma weapons trained forward, their steps heavy and deliberate. The wind howled between the glaciers, funneled into a biting, violent gust that would have crippled any normal army. But the Croth were relentless, their determination evident in their unwavering march forward. Holt waited until they were fully inside the choke point. Timing was everything. If they struck too soon, the Croth would scatter and reposition, using their superior firepower to overwhelm the Rangers. But if they waited too long... Now! Holt shouted into the comms. In an instant, the battlefield erupted into chaos. Explosions tore through the snow-covered ground as Briggs' charges detonated beneath the Croth's feet. The lead ranks were thrown into the air, their armor shredded by the concussive force. Shouts in the alien tongue echoed through the pass as the Croths struggled to regain their footing. Hit 'em hard! Holt roared, charging forward with his rifle raised. The Rangers emerged from their hidden positions like wolves descending upon prey. Kane fired off 2 precise shots, dropping a Croth soldier before the alien could raise his weapon. Holt moved with lethal grace, his rifle barking with each step. He aimed for the gaps in the Croth's armor, exploiting every weakness he'd observed over the course of their skirmishes. The aliens returned fire, but the storm was their enemy now. Plasma bolts went wide, searing the ice and snow but missing their intended targets. Holt weaved between the blasts, his heart pounding in his chest. Every movement was a calculation: where to step, when to fire, how to stay one step ahead of the enemy. Kane was at his side, firing methodically. They're falling back, he muttered, his breath misting in the cold air. Not yet, Holt replied, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the Croth commander in the distance. The alien was directing the retreat, his tall, imposing figure unmistakable even through the storm. They're setting a trap. The Croth commander raised a hand, and suddenly, the remaining plasma cannons roared to life, sending a volley of glowing energy straight toward the Rangers' position. Down! Holt shouted, diving behind a ridge of ice just as the plasma bolts slammed into the ground around them. The ice shattered, sending shards in every direction. Holt gritted his teeth, feeling the impact in his bones. We're pinned! Kane growled, pulling himself up from the snow. Holt's mind raced. They couldn't stay here. If they didn't move, the Croth would obliterate them with the next volley. But the Rangers had one last card to play. Briggs, Holt called into his comm. You still got that last charge? Affirmative, Cap, Briggs replied. What's the plan? Holt glanced at the towering glacier behind the Croth position. It was massive, a frozen behemoth looming over the battlefield. If they could bring it down. Blow the glacier, Holt ordered. We bury them. There was a brief pause. You got it, Cap. A moment later, another explosion shook the tundra. This time, it wasn't beneath the Croth, but above them. The glacier trembled, groaned, and then, with a deafening roar, it began to collapse. Tons of ice and snow cascaded down the mountainside, burying the Kroth forces in an avalanche of frozen death. Holt watched as the Kroth commander was swallowed by the ice, his voice lost in the storm. The plasma cannons fell silent, their operators crushed beneath the weight of the collapsing glacier. As the last of the snow settled, Holt stood slowly, surveying the destruction. The Kroth were gone. The Arctic, once again, had proven to be the deadliest weapon of all. "Let's get back to base," Holt said, his voice hoarse but steady. "It's over." Kane nodded, a weary smile tugging at his lips. "For now." Together, the Rangers melted back into the blizzard, as silent and unseen as they had arrived.